Now we're on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis. V'is sal kedaitach. Maimer lebeit Shammai kona kinyan gamur. If you don't accept Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Elazar, in his interpretation of Beit Shammai, but rather you take the position of kinyan gamur, the Beit Shammai hold that Maimer equals kinyan gamur. So why didn't Beit Shammai allow the two Yevamim lechatchila to marry the two sisters, the two Yevamos? And why did he require chalitza? Ze yasa maimar, v'ze yasa maimar, v'yikne. Ze yasa maimar v'nikne, meaning v'yikne, that one of the Yevamos, the brother could do a maimar, he'll make a kinyan gamur, and as a result, the zika to her sister's completely paka, because she's now achos ishto through the maimar. And v'zeh, the second Yavam, we'll call him Yehuda, Yasa Maimar, in the second Yavam, meaning Leah, Shimon's wife, Yiknos Olagamri. And now he could be Kones. He's not being Pokea in Achos Kukoso. So Levi will do a Maimar in Rachel, he'll make a complete kinyan. Yehuda will do a Maimar in Leah, and he'll make a complete. And from the fact that this is not an option, but rather the way we have this brisa transmitted, it means that lechatchila lo, it means that the kinyan is not a kinyan gomer. And that would support Rabbi Elazar in his interpretation of Beit Shammai. So the Gemara asks, Elamai, what are you trying to prove from Beit Shammai? That Maimer is doche dechia gemura. Even if I don't accept that Maimer is a kinyan gamur, but rather it's only doche the zika to the sister, right? That she shouldn't be achos ishto. So I'll still ask you a question. Why did Beit Shammai prohibit both Yevamim l'chadchila? Why not ze yasa maimar v'yidcha v'ze masa maimar v'yidcha? Let one of the brothers do a maimar and one of the sisters, and v'yidcha, and he'll be docha the zika to her sister, and he's now allowed to marry the balas hamaimar because he's not being pokeh and achos chukasa. And the same is true for the other Yavam. He'll do a maimar, and it'll be docha the zika rishona, the zika of the rishona, meaning of Rachel, and it'll be mutter him to be kones Leah. Elamai islachal maimar. Why is that we're not going to allow to do that and to divide up the Yevamos amongst the Yevamim? And the answer is because maimar that Torah, we're only going to allow through Maimar a hetera situation. Like, for example, in our Mishnah, at the time of the Maimar, Shimon's wife, Leah, had not yet fallen for Yibum. Is Dachi. Then he can be Dachi the Zika to the other sister after Shimon dies by doing a Maimar with Rachel. That's already a Maimar of the hetera. However, Maimar di Surah, when she became a Yevama Hasura at the time of his Maimar, for example, like in our case, the two sisters that fell both in front of two brothers, and each one of them is excluded, she's Asura L'Syami because of Achos Ishto Lo Dochi. The Maimar does not have the power to be Docha, the Zika of the Achos. In other words, to allow the Baal Samayim to get married. Achinami. So too here, we could say that Maimar Afilu Lamanti Omer, even according to Beit Shammai, that Maimar is Kona Kinyan Gomur, that's only Maimar Dehetera Koni. He's Kona's Yevama through Maimar, and therefore he's Mafkir the Zika to our sister. But the Suro, if the Maimar came at a time when the Yevama was not allowed to be Misyavmi. For example, both sisters fell for Yibum, and each one is ma'akiv the other sister because v'achos kukaso, lo kani such a maimer would not be konik kinyan gomer, and it can't be mafkia the zikas Yibum for the sister, and therefore in that case he's got achos ishto, or I should call it achos kukaso, for both of these Yevamim, and therefore lechatchila is not allowed to be kones, even through Maimon. So there's no proof from Beit Shammai in this brisa that they weren't matir the brothers to be kones alidei Maimer, that Maimer is not kone kinyan gomer. We could say the following, that maybe Maimer is kone kinyan gomer, but if the Maimer of the brothers is bisura, because each one of the two Yevamos are asura l'siyam because of achos kukaso, therefore the Maimer is not kone a kinyan gomer, which would allow him to be kones the balasam Maimar, and let the other Yavam be kones the sister. So therefore the Gemara rejects this proof of Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Ashi masni hochi. Rav Ashi has a different, shall we say, transmission of Rabbi Elazar. And that means that even according to Beit Shammai, the Maimer is not kone kinyan gomer. This is what Amar Rabbi Elazar, what Rabbi Elazar said, Lo tema Maimer le Beit Shammai dachi. Don't assume and interpret Beit Shammai to say that the Maimer is doche, the zika of the other Yevama, the other sister, meaning Leah, according to our the Chia Gemura, and she has no zika at all, and therefore she becomes tsarasa, and if she's tsarasa, is chalitza nami lo boy, and she won't even require chalitza because the alas hamaimer is docha the zika of, right? So Rachel zika is docha the zika of Leah, and Leah doesn't even need chalitza. She can get married lashuk without any chalitza. No, that's not so. Ela docha umishayerhu. Although it removes to some extent the zika, such a way that the balas hamaimer now would not be ma'akiv the zika, just one second. Ela maimer docha es zikos legabi balas hamaimer shelo ta'akiv zika es balas hamaimer zosei liyovam mishum achos kuka. Right, so the maimer now does to some extent remove the zika, so therefore there's no achos kuka as far as Rachel is concerned. Rachel's status is not that of an achos kuka, umishayerhu, but there is a residue, so to speak, of zika with regard to Leah, the sister of the Baal Samayim, and she cannot get married without chalitza. So if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are brothers, and Rachel, Leah sisters, and Reuven marries Rachel, Shimon marries Leah, and Reuven dies without any children, and Rachel falls to Levi for Yibum, and Levi influence of Maimar, and then Shimon dies, and his wife Leah falls to Levi for Yibum, Levi is allowed to be Kones Rachel, and the Zika to Levi is not Ma'akev, the heter for Levi to be Kones, to be Yabim Rachel. But Leah herself is not Muteres L'Shuk without Chalitza. So Levi has to give Chalitza to Leah, and Leah cannot marry anyone without that Chalitza. Omar Rabbi Ovin Afanan Namit Mina. And we can now prove this interpretation, Rabbi Lazar, of Beit Shammai from the words Beit Shammai in the Mishnah at the beginning of our parak, which Shnei Achim Nisum Shtei Achios, Meisu V'Nofel Sheseyem The Yibum Lifnei Shnei Achim Nosafim. So again, Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah, they die, and Rachel and Leah fall for Yibum to Levi and Yehuda. Beit Shammai Omrim, if each one of the brothers went ahead and created the facts on the ground, and he married each one of these two Yevamos, and Levi married Rachel, and Yehuda married Leah, Yekaimu. We're going to allow the marriage to go on. We're not going to enforce again. So Rabbi Yovan is now being medayik from the language of Beit Shammai, Yekaimu, means that they took the initiative on their own, these two Yevamim, Levi and Yehuda. They didn't ask for permission from Bezdin, and they married each one, respectively, one of the sisters. Then Beit Shammai allowed the Yevamim to continue their marriage. They don't need to force, we don't need to force again. But Lachatchila, if the Yevamim want to be Miyabim the Yevamos, we're not going to be mated them to do that. The Yevamos are asuros on each one of these two brothers, Levi and Yehuda, with an iser of achos kukasa. The isal kedait of maimer lebeit Shammai docha techia gemura. If you would say that the maimer is able to remove the zik entirely, why would Beit Shammai prohibit the Yevamim if they went to Bezdin to be miyabim l'chatchila? And rather we require chalitza to both Yevamos. The possibility would exist that ze yasa maimar v'yidcha, v'ze yasa maimar v'yidcha. Should allow the Yavam to do a maimar with Rachel, let's call him Levi, and then Shimon, and then Yehuda with Leah, the wife of Shimon. And V'yidcha, with the marriage, it's going to be Docha the Zika to the other Achos, and therefore there won't be a problem of Achos Kukasa. And the same thing for the other one. Now, if the Maimer is not Docha Lagamre, the Zika of the Tzara, then she needs Chalitza, and she's still considered Zekuka even after the Maimer. And that's why the Yevamim L'chatchila are not allowed to do a Maimer and to be Kones each one of the two sisters. That's Achos Kukaso. And now comes along Rav Ashi, and he wants to reject Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Avin, who brought a proof to Rabbi Lazar. The Ela HaKatani, we learned in that Mishnah, Beit Shammai Omer, Ishto Imo, the wife of the Yavam, meaning Rachel, who received Maimar, Imo. Imo means she's allowed, and he's allowed to continue marrying. In that marriage relationship, Levi can continue marrying in his marriage relationship with Rachel. And that's not considered a violation of Achos Kuka, Valazu, and as far as Leah is concerned, the wife of Shimon, she doesn't fall for Yibum at all. Teitze, she can go and get married without any chalitza, mishum achos isha. She's now asura la yavam with one of the arayas, and that is achos isha. So from the fact that the Mishnah does not qualify, it seems that the sister of the Balas Maimer, meaning Leah, is allowed to get married, and she doesn't need chalitza. Even before Levi was Kones Rachel. So it means the Maimar to Rachel was mafkia completely the Zika Shnia, and therefore Leah, doesn't need chalitza. That's against Rabbi Lazar. So therefore, we have to assume, says Rav Ashi, that the din is not like Rabbi Lazar, but rather, according to Beit Shammai, the Maimer is docha the zikas hatzara legamre, right? Because it says teitze mishum achos isha. And if you want to differentiate between our Mishnah here and the Mishnah at the beginning of the parak, is Yevamot the chazil lekulu is chazil miktsasa. a Yevama who is Ru'uya L'chol Mitzvahs Yevamim, she is Ru'uya to both Yibum and Chalitza, is Chazil Miktsasa. Ru'uya Hila Maimar, she Yidches Zikas HaChosa, Shot Akiv is Balas HaMaimar, Lusyamim. Therefore, when the Yovam does a Maimar with Rachel before the death of Shimon, that Maimar has the authority, the Koach, to be Docha the Zika of the sister of Leah, whose husband died afterwards. That's not going to be Mafkia, the Nefila for Yibum of Rachel. However, Yevamah de Lochas Yilakulu, if she's not Ru'uya L'chol Mitzvahs Yevamim, she doesn't fall, there's no possibility of Yibum, but rather there's only a possibility of Chalitza. Lochaz Yilamiktasa, she's not Ru'uya for Kinyan Maimar to be Docha, the Zika of Achos. Therefore, when two Yevamos fall in front of the two brothers, they're not allowed to be Miyabim any one of them because of Achos Kuka, and therefore the Maimar does not have the Koach that one of them could now be Docha, the Zika of her sister, and allow Yibum. And this leads us up to Boy Rav. And because of the lateness of the hour, we'll have to take a break at this point. We'll continue Mitzvah Hashem a little bit later on. Thank you so much.